Welcome to the video podcast Richard Gage 9/11 Unleashed, where truth and unity matter. Take the deep dive with highly influential voices in and around the 9/11 truth movement.
And welcome everybody back to Richard Gage 9/11 Unleashed. What a time it has been. So much going on. It's incredible. 9/11 truth is blooming, blossoming. And we're just honored to be a part of it. And when I say we, I mean my wonderful assistant and wife, Ms. Gail Gage. And there she is without her camera. There and with her camera. Hi.
Hi, everybody.
How are you doing, dear one?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Hey, we're back today with yet another guest, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
And you met him backstage, Captain
Yes.
Dan Hanley,
Yes.
pilot, 9/11 pilot whistleblowers. Before we bring the captain on to tell us what can and cannot be accomplished with airplanes and hijackers, we're going to tell everybody a few things about what we've been up to so people know. So why don't you start, Gail?
Okay. Well, the first thing that the most recent is we had another webinar today. It was the 9/11 An Architect's Guide Part 3, the Twin Towers at Extreme Heat. Now, this was part 3, so we will be taking a break. There will not be a webinar next Tuesday, and then it'll start over. So we'll have part 1 again on January 25th, which is 2 weeks from today. And then on Thursday, last Thursday, let's go.
Just hold on, just so people know, we've got to tell people what these webinars are. This is the evidence, the scientific forensic evidence in 3 parts. We start with Building 7, which is part 1, and then we go to the Twin Towers explosiveness in part 2, and in part 3 we have the Twin Towers and extreme heat. An incredible lineup of all the forensic evidence that I've gathered over 15 years. And it doesn't, this is the encapsulation of the evidence that I've worked on. And by the way, if those of you who don't know, I'm no longer with AE 9/11 Truth. I have been released, and we prefer to call it unleashed, so that we can expand our wings and cover topics like we are today. So if you want to learn more about being unleashed and how you can get unleashed, just open your big mouth and you will find yourself in some trouble. And it always happens. It's been happening for 15 years, actually. But at AE 9/11 Truth, I was supposed to stick with the World Trade Center evidence, which was our subject, but I didn't. And so here I am talking about hijackers and planes. But go ahead, Gail. What's next? Thursday.
All right. So last Thursday, we had Daniela Gansler, right? Saying it correctly, from Switzerland. The podcast was about false flags. It was really, really good. So if you missed it, be sure to catch that. It would be, it's on all the social media platforms. And then next Thursday, this coming Thursday, we have Barbara on again, Barbara Honegger. She is doing a podcast. The topic is war games. So we get to have her back. She's awesome. This is going to be
on
really
9/11, they
podcast.
had drills that paralleled, interestingly enough, the plane hijackings that were going on just to try to confuse all the air traffic controllers. But Gail, what about last night?
Wow. Yes, our special podcast last night that we did, we really wanted to thank everybody. We're so overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support that all of you have given us. It's just amazing. And so we wanted to do like a recap of what we've been doing since Richard has gone solo. And then also to try to somehow portray our appreciation to everybody. Words wouldn't be able to do it, but just hopefully all of you know that we love all of you and we're so grateful for all of your support.
So we went through all the efforts that you have assisted us in making, including the upcoming 9/11 conference, starting with the Pentagon on March 19th, Saturday. We will be issuing this week the announcement in official and the signups for 9/11 Con, or at least this weekend. And we're very excited about that. We'll tell you more about that soon, but stay tuned to the website, richardgage911.org, so you can learn all about that. And what else, Gail?
Well, we are having our trip to Anarchapulco conference. It's the Anarchapulco 2022. We've been sharing a lot about it. Richard does a really good job of explaining exactly what an anarchist is and isn't, but he'll be a speaker, and they do have virtual attendees. So you can get a virtual ticket for a virtual spot in there to be able to watch. And it's really high quality. You can go in there after the presentations for all the speakers. You can ask questions. You go into chat rooms to chat with other people watching the same conferences. And so it's really high quality. And if you sign up using our affiliation code, Richard's speaker affiliation code, then you get 10% off.
All caps.
So it's all the information is
all caps. Richard Gage 911.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know if the
Richard
caps
Gage
mattered.
911. All caps.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a speaking engagement, and there will be dozens of speakers, and you will have the opportunity to be among the tens of thousands of fortunate people who get to see these incredible speakers on the topics of freedom and the disease that's going around, which is anti-freedom, especially the solutions proposed by the tyrannical government that is increasingly out of control here. Well, did we cover enough of it? We've got to get to our guest, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Is there any other announcement?
Really quick, we are using Zoom as our platform instead of StreamYard to just tonight. And so I will be still gathering your questions from YouTube, and I'm going to attempt to get them off of Facebook also. So go ahead and send us all your questions and we'll get them answered. To Facebook, though. Definitely not streaming to Facebook. So YouTube. So if you're able to go on YouTube, you don't even need a YouTube account, but if you can go on YouTube and Richard Gage 911 and join us there, and then you can ask your questions.
Yay. Well, with that in mind, I want to tell you a few things here. Let me ask you a question first, though. Do you really know what happened with the airplanes and the hijackers? Well, we had Captain Dan Hanley on a couple of months ago, and we had a bad connection, and I felt so bad. I wanted to bring him back so we could cover this material in detail without interruption. He's a retired civilian, military, and commercial airline pilot of 35 years. He was illegally terminated in violation of RICO laws from United Airlines in 2003 for speaking out about his research on the 9/11 flights and hijackers. You see, Dan was on the ball well before I woke up in 2006 to what really happened at the World Trade Center and the surrounding events of 9/11. Dan is an American citizen who has resided in Islamabad, Pakistan for over 10 years. He currently serves as director and international public spokesperson for the global grassroots effort 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers. The website is 911pilots.org. So be sure to check that out. We're going to be walking through some of the important elements of that website tonight. 911pilots.org. The YouTube channel is 9/11 Pilots. You can find many of these elements on the videos that we're going to be playing on the YouTube channel. So with that in mind, I am proud to introduce to you Mr. Captain Dan Hanley. And Dan is coming in right now. There he is. Dan, how are you? There you are. We see your picture, Dan.
I don't know why you. There I am.
Oh, we're still looking for your beautiful face.
Uh-oh, I can see me on the screen right now.
Here it comes. There we are. That's
Yeah.
Dan Hanley in the flesh. Hey, great to see you again, Dan.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Richard. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. You're so welcome. We're so glad to have you back. Now, let's let Gail do her job. She's going to be collecting questions on YouTube. Any parting thoughts, Gail?
No, I don't.
I got a parting thought for you.
Oh.
We made a big announcement last night here at Richard Gage 9/11.
Oh, yes.
And that is that Gail, after an 8-year career as a service administration technician.
I can tell them what I've
Service
done.
administrator. You go right
yes,
ahead.
Yes. So I've worked at where I work, we make ventilators, and I've been there almost 8 years. And for the past probably 3 years or so, I've been the service administrator. And I love the company. I love the people I work with, and I've loved my job. However, there's a greater need for me helping Richard in our venture together with Richard Gage 9/11. So I gave my 2 weeks notice, and a week from tomorrow is my last day. And we owe it all to all of you who have supported us. You have all made it possible, because I actually was thinking it might be another year or so before I'd be able to come home full time and work full time at home. And there's just been such an outpouring of love through the funds that, so we're taking a step of faith.
She used to come home and work nights and weekends with me. And she is the consummate 9/11 Truth volunteer. I mean, she'd come home and she would just work. Now she's going to be home in our home office here and work 15 hours a day. So,
Yes.
So she's got it easy at work for the next week, but then it's going to be difficult. Gail,
I
we'll
am
see
excited.
you with lots of questions. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
We'll see you soon. Oh, wait, we're going to put you back in the waiting room here. All right, Captain Dan Hanley, let's remind our viewers how you woke up to what really happened at 9/11.
Okay, well, it goes back to where I was a 777 captain in New York for United Airlines. And I was actually there in Newark Airport the day of 9/11. And like everybody else, initially, my knee-jerk reaction was we were under attack. And my immediate reaction was, I got to get out of town. I thought a suitcase nuke would be hitting the city next, because I had actually slept through both the plane crash, all the plane crashes. I didn't wake up till 11 that day. I was supposed to go to London that night. So initially, I believed that the official story. But as time went on, as a 777 captain at United, there were certain things that weren't happening that were being promised by the company, security-wise. And I was flying with crews that wanted me to speak out and say something, which I did. And the backlash I got was tremendous. I was told, keep your head down. These guys are nasty. Watch what you're doing. If you take it to the next level, you're going to get hurt. So I thought, what's this all about? So I didn't heed their advice and proceeded forward and started submitting reports, making phone calls, etc. And it was when I got this tremendous blowback that I realized that they were trying to hide things, because there were big holes in the aviation security system. And what I was saying was exposing the farce of the whole system. And they couldn't have me out on the line saying these things. So I won't go into detail as to how it happened. And when we get into the website, I can tell you where to find the information on what did happen to me. But ultimately, I was illegally grounded for life as a pilot. for speaking out on issues concerning 9/11. So it was a real tragic event in my life. It practically ruined my personal life, but that led me down the road to start searching for other answers as to what happened on that day. And one of the biggest eye openers for me was when I saw or read or listened to the flight credentials of the hijacker. And having flown for 35 years and having started out in Cessna aircraft, light Cessna aircraft, and then flown the 767, 757 later in my career, I said, this can't be possible. And it wasn't until 2006, and we'll be discussing the uninterruptible autopilot system, that I discovered that it even existed, and it was my aha moment. That's how they did it. So that's really where it took off for me, was 2006, which I think was about the same time it took off for you, right, Richard?
Yeah, exact same year, huh?
Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. And there's an About Dan Hanley page on our website. And if you scroll to the bottom of that page, there's 2 interviews I did that go into a lot of detail as to what happened. If you go up the top there, Richard, it says About Dan Hanley at the top of the page. Yeah, click on that. And it just says a little bit about me on that page. It isn't clicking for some reason. There you go. It says a little bit about me. And what I'll say before we get to the bottom of the page is I had 35 years of flying, 15 different aircraft, and over 20,000 flight hours. And I can unequivocally state without embarrassment or reservation that I could not have flown the 9/11 flight profiles, in particular the Pentagon flight profile, and neither could the hijackers. But anyhow, that's basically what I. Go ahead,
break
Richard.
that down, Dan. What does that mean that you and other pilots could not have flown the flight profiles? We don't know what a flight profile is.
Well, we're going to be getting into that, Richard, if you want to wait till we get to it, or I could go into it now.
Sure. No, we can wait. If you got a plan for illuminating
Sure,
us, that's great.
sure,
You go
sure.
right ahead. What
Anyhow,
happened here?
oh, that was me in flight training. I'm kind of bragging on myself. I was number 1 out of 228 students going through basic flight training in Pensacola. I'm bragging on my credentials to try to enhance my credibility by putting that on there. But it really wasn't my idea. One of the guys that constructed the site said, "Hey, let's put it on there." I said, "Sure." But if you go down to the bottom there, Richard, there's 2 interviews there I did on Malaysian TV regarding this uninterruptible autopilot system. But that one, they're the life and career of Captain Dan Hanley. Was an interview I did 12 years ago in Phoenix, but it goes in the one above that, Richard. It goes into detail of the events leading up to my grounding. And then the one interview beneath that was an interview I did last year with Jason Goodman in New York, where I go into a lot of detail about how they grounded me and the method they used to do it, which is common in the industry, Richard. If they can't get you professionally or medically, they go after you psychologically or otherwise. And that's what they did to me and other people. And it sends a chilling signal out to other would-be whistleblowing pilots: keep your head down or they'll crush it like a grape. You don't speak out on anything or they'll come after you. But down beneath that interview there, Richard, there's a long, lengthy affidavit if you want to scroll down, and that goes into detail too. So I have spent entire hour-long programs going into my medical grounding. So there's the information if you want to look at it. Back up at the top of the website, Richard, there's a Join Us page, because we're a global. There you go. We're a global grassroots organization, and we have people joining us from all over the world, including pilots. And it's a real simple to join. It's all we need is your first name, last name, and your email address. And down there in the comments section, if you're a pilot, we're asking you to fill out what airplanes that you've flown in your life. And if you're the host of another program, like I just got a message via this page of the website from a host in South Africa that wants to interview me. So if you're the host of another program and want to get a hold of us, we check the messages there every day. So Those, whoops, we're getting feedback somehow.
Yeah, go
Anyhow.
ahead, Dan.
Okay, if you submit that, we'll send you an email back. All you have to do is respond with okay, so we can confirm you're not a bot. And you'll be on our email list, and we'll provide you with future updates on our progress. So
That's great.
if you go to the homepage, Richard, on the far right there, far right-hand side, yeah, if you look at these slides, welcome to 911pilot.org. This pretty much tells what we're all about. We're demanding the truth about 9/11 and justice for the world. And then we ask this question: could unskilled pilots do this? And we answer it by saying highly skilled pilots could. So if you scroll down, Richard, we can get into the website. I didn't do a PowerPoint presentation because we can essentially use the website to do it. But
Sure.
on this page, I introduced myself. I'm an American citizen. I've lived in Islamabad, Pakistan for over 12 years. And some people think because I'm somewhat controversial in the things that I say that I may be hiding out over here in Pakistan. And nothing could be further from the truth. I fell in love with and married a Pakistani lady, a beautiful lady. And as a matter of fact, 12 years ago yesterday was our wedding date. Anyhow, I've lived here happily ever since. But I currently serve as the director and international public spokesperson for this grassroots effort. And we've got the purpose of our group is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, which is a profound statement to make. But we claim that the aircraft were electronically hijacked and remotely controlled through employment of the system called the uninterruptible autopilot, which enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computer and guide the aircraft to its target destination. Now, once this system is engaged, as we'll talk about later, the pilots can't disconnect the system. They're along for the ride. So stop me anytime you got any questions there, Richard. But our ultimate goal of the organization is to recruit highly experienced civilian, military, and airline pilots from around the world, whether they're active or retired, who would be willing to examine all the evidence that we have on the website. This website's sort of a refresher for them because it's been 20 years since the event occurred. But we're taping the interviews of these pilots, and they're coming forth and saying what I said. Not only could they not have flown the aircraft, I could not have flown, especially the Pentagon profile. And that bottom sentence there, we're looking for experienced pilots' input, identifying the skills and aptitude which pilots must master, distinguishing them from persons who lack such training. Now, Richard, you asked me about a profile, and we give an example here of the Pentagon flight profile, allegedly flown by a 29-year-old Saudi Arabian hijacker named Hani Hanjour, who supposedly piloted American 77 that struck the Pentagon on 9/11. Now, the aircraft took off from Dulles Airport in Washington, climbing west, heading out towards the west coast. It got to cruising altitude for a while, did an about face, a 180-degree turn, and headed back towards Washington in a descent. And when it got to 7,000 feet just west of the Pentagon, it starts this accelerating, descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to arrive exactly at ground level without striking the surface. And it hit the Office of Naval Intelligence at nearly 500 miles per hour. And this was on the first attempt of the aircraft to do this maneuver. Now, this maneuver was replicated in a flight simulator. Among others was Pilots for 9/11 Truth, which is another grassroots organization. And highly experienced pilots couldn't perform this maneuver on successive attempts without crashing the airplane. And yet we've been led to believe this 29-year-old, and we'll get into his flight credentials later, did this on his first attempt, which is really ludicrous. Now, Richard, you know about the next group I'm going to talk about because you're a member of it, recently joining the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. And they've got a website, if you want to call it up, Richard. anyhow, for those of you who aren't familiar with Lawyers Committee for 9/11 inquiry, a group of lawyers got together several years ago
Hey,
and
Dan,
met. Yeah,
Dan, are you able to see the screen share?
I can. I can.
Is the lawyers committee up?
Yes, it is.
Oh, great, thanks a lot. Go ahead.
Yes. Anyhow, a group of lawyers got together with the biggest 9/11 whistleblowers in the world, and they compiled 57 evidence packages and presented it to a new U.S. attorney in New York City, Jeffrey Berman, compelling him to announce the convening of a grand jury investigation into the Lawyers Committee's allegation that World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7, and yes, there was a third building, building 7, that collapsed on 9/11, were all brought down by controlled demolition and not by jet aircraft impact damages or the jet fuel fires that ensued. So they've come up against, this is an understatement, they've come up against resistance with the Department of Justice, the FBI, and an organization called National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they're litigating this. They've gone through several processes in court, and it appears it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. But I can tell you, I've looked at the evidence packages, and there's a lot of different witnesses that are very credible that have come forth with information. And it's a slam dunk. If this ever got before a grand jury, Richard, you'll agree with me, the jurists would have no alternative but to hand out indictments on people involved in this thing. So how are we involved with the Lawyers Committee? A few years ago, I met with on Skype with Dave Meiswickle, the former president, and Mick Harrison, the chief litigator. And they listened to what we had to say about the uninterruptible autopilot system and the lack of experience of the pilots. And the organization doesn't represent us legally, nor do they presently endorse what we're saying. But they've agreed in the future, they're encumbered right now with what they're doing, but they agreed sometime in the future, possibly accepting our evidence and our pilot testimony and doing the same thing, compiling evidence packages and submitting it to a U.S. attorney somewhere in the United States in hopes that they'll convene a grand jury investigation. So that's where we're headed with a lot of this stuff. Richard, if you could go back to the website page you were on,
Yeah,
I'll continue from there.
let's do
But
that.
there's a donate page there on the Lawyers Committee website. They have overhead expenses like everyone else, and any donations, large or small, you can contribute to them is greatly appreciated. They're a nonprofit organization, so give when you can, what you can. We have a donate button on our website, but it's not connected to anything yet, so we
What
can't.
does that mean? You can't get donations?
No, well, I tried. We did have it on PayPal, and PayPal isn't available in Pakistan, so they canceled the account. Same with GoFundMe. It has to do with terrorist financing and money laundering here in Pakistan. It's just not available. So we're in search. We're a not-for-profit entity, and we've got one of the things we're doing is a documentary that's costing us money also. So, Richard, if you could scroll down beneath that photo at the mid page there, we'll tell you what else we've been doing here. Yeah, there. Yeah, there you go. And a year ago, August, I filed an FAA whistleblower report with the FAA hotline office in Washington and provided them with information that supported our allegations that these airplanes were remotely controlled. And initially they were, go ahead,
Do you want
Richard.
to tell people, Dan, about the opportunity that you have with the Prime Minister, or shall we let that go for until it actually happens?
I just as soon right now let it go, Richard. I don't want to put undue pressure on him if he ever would.
Okay.
So
You go.
I'll just mention it. We're working right now with another professor from the University of Punjab to get me in to see the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, so we can provide him all the information that we know regarding 9/11 that they may not know, such as the Lawyers Committee and the work they're doing, Niels Harrit, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, all the work they did there. So there's a lot of information we suspect that the Pakistan government doesn't know. And part of the reason we're doing that is I'm trying to get on the media in Pakistan and other Muslim countries in the Middle East and South Asia. But anyhow, getting back to what we're doing here, I submitted this report to the FAA, and initially they were very receptive. They sent me a receipt acknowledging that they had received the report. And the next week, I get an email invitation to join an aeronautical engineer in Seattle and his cohort on Skype to discuss this matter. Well, I called him up and we had about a 10-minute conversation, and he was pretty tight-lipped about what I had to say. He was a private pilot himself, a glider pilot, and listened to what I had to say. And after I got off the phone, I did a data dump on him with a lot more information. And when the FAA realized what we were saying and what we were doing, they went silent on it. I tried to call this guy back. He wouldn't answer the phone. Emailed him. He wouldn't respond. So I emailed his boss in DC. I had her email address. She turns around full circle and sends me back to the FAA hotline office. And over the course of a month, they tried to stonewall us. This is what this short video is about here. But over the course of a month, they stonewalled us. And then they came out with an email saying, look, we've already covered this issue with these 2 whistleblower reports. And they gave us the number of 2 reports, thinking that would make us go away. Well, I did an FOIA request. One report didn't exist, and the other one was totally irrelevant. So I won't drag this out any longer. What it turned out, we found out that besides stonewalling us, they were being deceitful and lying to us and trying to convince us that they were conducting an in-depth investigation into our allegations and evidence when in fact they weren't. So that started me off on a letter writing campaign. You'll see links to 7 letters there. If you click on each one, it takes you to a separate page of the website. But if you want to go in, if you want to see where we've been with the federal government, just read these letters and see what we've, there's stonewalling of a federal report to the FAA administrators, one example, but we've sent all these letters in and made phone calls to the appropriate office, and it says, to date, no response has been received from any office. So we're getting stonewalled. Go ahead, Richard.
Not much action coming from DC.
No.
9/11 truth, is it?
No, it's almost identical to what's going on with the Lawyers Committee in a different arena. So we did get a computer-generated auto reply from the Secretary of Transportation there, Pete Buttigieg, but it's typical of the response you get when you send a letter to any of these politicians. So,
all right, well, let's get into the evidence.
Okay, let's get into the evidence. Well, let me just say why we're doing this, and it's the same for the same reasons that everybody's out in the truth movement. There's never been a criminal investigation into 9/11. Not one pilot was permitted to testify before the 9/11 Commission as to the absurdity of this ludicrous notion that these hijackers actually flew the aircraft. So pilots are demanding their day in court. And the 9/11 Commission wasn't a criminal investigation. So like you, Richard, at the Lawyers Committee and elsewhere, we're just pushing for a criminal investigation by an independent source into these allegations. But if you want to go back up to the top there, the menu page, the menu tab up at the top on the right-hand side, it's a drop-down menu. You see it there, Richard? Yeah, there you go. If you want to go down to airplanes, there you go. We got 2 airplane photos here. We're doing a comparative analysis here. That airplane right there is a Cessna 150 aircraft. It's 27 feet long, has a horsepower rating on the engine of 180 horsepower, weighs about a ton, and cruises at about 100 knots. Now you can contrast that with the 760. That was the primary training aircraft for the hijackers, okay? You compare that to a 767 aircraft that's 180 feet long, has a thrust of 48,000 pounds per engine, cruises at 500 knots, or they were flying at 500 knots in these maneuvers supposedly, and that's debatable. And we say it's impossible for those guys to have transitioned without ever having flown a 757 or 767. It would be akin to having driven your family car for about a year with your license, and then climbing into a semi-tractor trailer that you've never driven before, get it up to 500 miles per hour and try to drive it to a garage without scraping the sides of the truck, or getting into or getting into a Formula 4 race car and that you never driven before and get it up to high speed and try to keep it on the track. It's just that stark a difference between the two aircraft. So that's what we're trying to point. That's what we're trying to point out here. If you go back up the menu page, Richard, the second one we're going to look at is the cockpits on the two airplanes here. The first photo you see here is out of a Cessna 172 again. And you notice the old round dial instruments only on one side of the cockpit, a radio, a few knobs and switches, and that's all for the airplane. Very simple design. Now you scroll down to the lower picture. It's a photo.
This was the primary flight training aircraft of the 9/11 hijackers. So they never flew a 767 or anything else that big. Is that right?
That's correct.
And they acknowledge that. So did they use flight simulators or something?
Well, a couple I've read were trained in flight simulators, but not 757, 767s, and it wasn't extensive training, okay?
Oh, okay. I mean, look at this sucker.
Yeah, this is the 767 cockpit, and we say, you notice any subtle differences? Well, of course you do.
This looks like a simulator, right?
Yes, that would look like a simulator of a 767. Oh,
no, I mean, this is a simulator, right?
Yeah, that is a simulator. Yeah, I can see out the window there. But you look at the instruments, it's called electronic flight instrument system. It's a different display altogether from those round dial instruments. You go to the engine instruments where you had a single RPM gauge for the Cessna aircraft. Here you've got four different engine indications for setting power, and engine instruments on those two squares that you see on the back side of the panel there. And if you go to the left or right of the pedestal there, you see two small black squares there. Yeah, right down there at the bottom. Those are called control display units. And what they do is provide input data to the flight management computer and other functions on the airplane. And there's several pages of information there, and they wouldn't have had any understanding or knowledge of how to use it. And that coupled with a panel right under the windshield there called the mode control panel is what navigates the airplane. So you have to ask yourself, how did these guys from the point of hijacking to the point of impact or wherever the airplane wound up manage to navigate the airplanes? And we say they couldn't have. So that's what we're showing here. The next menu item, Richard, up at the top, unless you got questions, Richard.
No, let's keep rolling. You're doing
okay.
Great.
This is the hijackers page. We profile them, and we really don't go, and we don't cover the hijacker for United 93 that crashed in Shanksville, just the three that allegedly struck targets. And we really don't concentrate too heavily on the two airplanes that struck the Twin Towers, but on Hani Hanjour and the Pentagon profile, because that's the smoking gun. So we're saying, how could they have done this in their first attempt at those speeds? And we don't think they could have done it. The first hijacker you see there is Mohammed Atta. If you scroll down a bit, Richard, he was the ringleader, supposed ringleader of the hijackers. He was an Egyptian and the oldest of all of them, age 33. And he flew American 11 into the North Tower, the first airplane to strike. And again, the speed at which he was traveling, you say, how simple would that be? Just point the airplane at the building and go. Well, if you're only a few degrees off heading at that speed, you can miss the building altogether. And we use that same analogy I was just talking before about the semi-tractor trailer. People think they're big buildings, but in reality, compared to the size of the airplane, it's a sliver of concrete and steel sticking up out of the ground that they had to hit at that speed and that closure rate. So that's all we really talk about Muhammad Atta. The next, we say it was basically a straight in approach at about 500 miles per hour. Now, Marwan al-Shehhi was from the UAE, and he piloted supposedly United Flight 175 that crashed into the South Tower. His was the fastest airplane of all, doing about 590 miles per hour. Now, the most profound thing about his supposed performance of this maneuver is he approached the South Tower from the south and at this incredible speed and closure rate. And when he got 12 seconds prior to impact, the airplane rolls into a 30-degree angle of bank turn and precisely strikes the building on its first attempt. And had someone's computed this, I didn't do it, neither did our group, but someone computed that had that airplane not rolled into that 30-degree bank at precisely that point in time, it would have missed the building by 800 feet. So
wow. The building's only 200 feet wide.
Yeah.
So 12 seconds prior, it does a 30-degree. Now, 30 degrees means that the wings are spread out. That's 0 degrees when you're flying level, and 30 degrees implies that you lifted one with 30 degrees. That's a huge bank, right? Is that what you're talking about?
That's a pretty good sized bank, but if you scroll down, we say we contend that this would have been a very challenging maneuver for even the most experienced pilots have been able to perform. So that's about all we talk about Marwan al-Shehhi, but here's the real culprit here. Hani Hanjour. I said he's from Saudi Arabia. He's only 29 years old, okay? And we say allegedly crashing, and these hijackers allegedly flew the airplane because it's questionable, number one, by some people, whether airplanes actually hit the tires, et cetera. So I use those terms because people climb all over my case saying there was no airplanes, et cetera. So anyhow, we already talked about the flight profile that he supposedly was supposed to have performed this maneuver at a low altitude. And the amazing thing there is supposedly he did not strike the surface and he hit it on the first attempt. And incidentally, that aircraft struck the Office of Naval Intelligence that housed the budget analyst office. And what significance is that? Well, the day prior to 9/11, then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld announced that $2.3 trillion went missing from the Pentagon budget. And guess where the budget analysts were that were investigating that? In the office that day. And over 30 of the budget analysts were killed out of the 50 that were working in that office. So was that a coincidence that it would strike that exact building? And given that those investigations were being conducted, we don't think it was. If you go down, we've got notes on Hani Hanjour, and they're extensive. If you want to scroll down a little bit there. 1 month prior to 9/11, in August 2001, Hani Hanjour goes to the Freeway Airport in Maryland with the intent on running a Cessna 172. There were two instructors, Sherry Baxter and Ben Connor. They had flown previously on 3 flights with this guy, and they went to Marcel Bernard, who I just talked to last week at the Freeway Airport. He was the chief flight instructor there, and told him, don't let this guy run an 172 because he cannot handle flying or landing a single-engine Cessna 172. This is 1 month prior to 9/11.
That's
so
incredible.
It is, and people don't realize this. And we'll get into why the 9/11 Commission never covered any of this. So if you scroll down, we got other notes beneath this about what a poor student he was. He came to the States in the mid-90s, took some training, and then went back to Saudi Arabia. But when he came back to the States, they wouldn't accept him into the school because he was such a poor student the first time he was there. They didn't want to waste resources on him. And we got a New York Times article was reporting on his lackadaisical performance. ABC News did. The Chicago Tribune did. So you can read over theirs and see what a weak student this guy was. And he was the pilot that supposedly performed the most spectacular aerial feat of all the hijackers.
Describe that aerial feat again.
Okay. A descending, accelerating turn, 270-degree corkscrew turn from 7,000 feet just west of the Pentagon to arrive precisely at ground level without skidding the surface at over 500 knots to precisely hit the Office of Naval Intelligence.
Wow.
And he couldn't 500 knots. Well, 1 knot is 1.15 statute miles per hour. So it's about, when you're measuring in knots, the miles per hour is about 15% higher than that. So
okay.
So that's roughly it. So who is Eddie Shalev or Shalev? I don't know how to pronounce his name. This is very interesting here, okay? And you can read it on your own. And we just recently uncovered this information, but it's been out there for several years, okay? Now, we just said that Hani Hanjour was denied rental of an aircraft at the Freeway Airport. 3 days later, this Eddie Shalev certified that him to rent a 172 from the Congressional Air Charters, okay? Just 3 days after they refused to rent him an airplane, okay? And the 9/11 Commission doesn't make any mention of this nor of Eddie Shalev, okay? But who is Eddie Shalev? He is a Israeli citizen, a farmer, paratrooper, commando in the Israeli Defense Force. And he remained unknown for several years there, it says. But the 9/11 Commission did not allow any of these pilots to testify before it, but they took Mr. Shalev's statement where he stated Hani Hanjour was a good pilot, and that appeared as a footnote in the 9/11 Commission report. And
but the other ones didn't, huh? The ones that said he was a crappy pilot, they didn't.
Exactly. And the one pilot I was just talking about, Ben Connor, he said he was waiting for the call to come appear before the 9/11 Commission, but the call never came.
Oh.
They didn't want to know about that. So they buried this, and this is part of the information that we dumped on the FAA, the Secretary of Transportation, and everybody else. This information about Hani Hanjour, Eddie Shalev, Ben Connor, and Sherry Baxter, saying we want them deposed, to get depositions on these people. We want this investigated further. We want it brought to public light, but we're not getting any response from them. So anyhow, read that whole page there, because it's very, very interesting. And you see how the government has covered up. And they're saying that Shalev may have returned back to Israel, because after this happened, that fixed base operator at that airport closed up and Eddie Shalev disappeared. So never to be seen. So any questions there, Richard, or comments?
No, let's keep going.
Okay, go back to the menu and we'll go to what's next. Pilot interviews. Okay, we said we were recruiting highly trained pilots from around the world, and we are, and we've been successful. Unfortunately, when we try to put these interviews, which usually last 15 minutes and maybe a half hour of these pilots on YouTube, they've been taking them down for hate speech. So we tried to put them up on BitChute, and BitChute closed our account, saying that it extremely violated community standards for BitChute, and closed our account completely. So we found a couple other video platforms we're putting up, perchance YouTube closes this down completely. But here's an example. If you could play, Richard, that section I told you, you can hear what Doug Green here has to say about Hani Hanjour.
I absolutely believe that it was utterly impossible for such inexperienced pilots to even imagine that they can transition from a simple airplane like a Cessna 172 that I also flew during my earlier years in training to a wide-body jet like a 757 or a 767. I've flown both of those aircraft. The aircraft systems are far too advanced for anybody with that kind of experience to hand fly or even use the autopilot system connected with LNAV and VNAV directly linked to the flight management computer. The flight management computer in the Boeing aircraft are very similar between the 757, 767, the 777, and the 747. It's very similar. And for a novice, an amateur, with little to no training, that certainly isn't provided at a primary flight school, to actually program the flight management computer and to integrate it and couple up the autopilot, and to know how to select LNAV, VNAV profile, and to design that profile specifically to fly this terrible approach and crash into the Pentagon is impossible. And when you consider the maneuvering that was required, the maneuvering airspace that was required for a large jet of this nature, and you consider the cornering velocity, the high rates of speed, the radius of turn, this would be overwhelming for a pilot without any significant experience. Even a pilot with my experience, having flown light attack aircraft and having done aggressive maneuvers, it would be impossible for me. When you consider the high rates of speed that the aircraft traveled and that they actually exceeded their max structural limiting airspeed by 110 knots, the aircraft the structure of the aircraft would have been compromised, especially from over-G'ing the airplane.
Right.
Well, you just answered my next two questions because I was going to.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah,
Incredible piece.
the interviews we conduct, we don't pre-brief. We just tell them we're going to ask you these questions and then let them come up with the answers. But they're all similar interviews and similar response from these highly trained pilots. So take a listen to what they say and just don't take my word for it that we don't believe they could have flown the airplane. So that's about all we have to say. This is part of we're trying to collect these the testimonies from these pilots for future litigation. So we'll see where it goes from there. But the next item on the drop-down menu there is the remote control page, and this one we have the most videos on, and we have one page to convince you that it's possible to remotely control a large aircraft, okay? And we explained to you that remote controlled aircraft technology dates as far back as over 75 years ago in 1944, towards the end of World War II. U.S. military launched Operation Aphrodite, and what they did was got out old B-24 bombers to lessen the weight of the aircraft, and they loaded it with 30,000 pounds of Torpex, which is a highly incendiary compound. And the pilots were required to make the takeoff, but once they got airborne, they bailed out of the airplane, and these aircraft were remotely guided to targets in Europe. Now, this was, 78 years ago this happened? This is a 2-minute film clip here that explains the operation. And I also mentioned that Joe Kennedy, JFK's older brother, was killed on one of these top secret missions when the airplane blew up due to a malfunction before he could bail out. So listen to this.
The German V-2 rocket lit a fire under yet another smart bomb project, one that involved the first son of an ill-starred American family. By the fall of 1944, the V-2 was striking British cities. Secretly, an American project codenamed Aphrodite was underway to destroy the B-2 launch sites. Worn-out bombers, like the B-24 depicted in this period cartoon, were re-enlisted, wired for radio remote control, fitted with television cameras. The plane was then loaded up with explosives to make the equivalent of a 20,000-pound bomb. One of the Aphrodite volunteers was Joe Kennedy Jr.
Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. was a Navy pilot. He had just completed his tour of duty in Europe. Technically, he could have gone home, but he volunteered to stay for this highly classified project. Basically, he had volunteered to be a takeoff pilot.
Pilot and co-pilot were needed to get the bomber airborne, after which they could parachute to safety. The pilotless bomber could then be remotely steered over the channel and into the V-2 sites. On August 12, 1944, Kennedy took off on mission number 3.
Joe Jr.'s mission should have been a really short one. He and his co-pilot, Wilfred Willey, really just needed to take this bomber off, get it into straight and level flight, and then bail out.
While they were still over Britain, there was a premature detonation. As a secret report said, the plane was, quote, suddenly enveloped in a large circular ball of flame and white smoke, and disintegrated in the air. The bodies of Kennedy and his co-pilot were never found. Aphrodite flew a few more missions, but never knocked out a V-2 base. Later in 1944, the project was scrapped.
Oh, very interesting.
Anyhow, Richard, that was 78 years ago. And
Yeah.
you got to imagine the technology advances. So the second item that we cover, and there are more items than this on that on the website page, Richard. In 1984, NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and the Federal Aviation Administration conducted this joint crash test experiment. And they wanted to test crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. And that's a photo there of a Boeing 720 large 4-engine commercial jet that they loaded with crash dummies and cameras. And they wanted to record the event of the crash. But they took this big airplane off by remote control, flew it around the pattern several times and auto-landed it before intentionally crash landing the aircraft. Now, the film you see here shows their final approach. The wings were rocking. They wanted to simulate, they wanted to actually crash the airplane. But it just shows you that the capability in 1984 that they had of remotely guiding a commercial jet aircraft. You don't have to show this whole thing, Richard. I just want them to see the...
From the moment the CID aircraft smashed
That's
down
remote
onto the
control.
desert floor, the model accident was gone. The plane struck the ground somewhat short of the target, with the left outboard engine low and yawed to the left. It remained yawed to the left as it slid into the wing opening cutters. The first cutter entered the right inboard engine at about the 7th stage of the compressor. It slashed through the engine, broke.
Okay, that's all we wanted to show there was, hey, this is the big jet. It was remote control. This is 1984. Now, if you jump ahead to the mid-90s, we'll start talking to you about this uninterruptible autopilot system, okay? And the stated design purpose of the system was to prevent would-be hijackers from commandeering a commercial jet aircraft in flight by remotely taking control of the aircraft autopilot and flight navigation system and routing it to one of 108 airports in the world where they can make an auto landing, okay? Now, proof that this exists, you can Google uninterruptible autopilot or Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot, and a Wikipedia article will pop up telling about this system. And it's somewhat misleading. It was because it was patented, it says in this article, and we do have a copy of the patent. It was patented in 2006, after 9/11. But we have proof that the system was actually developed and produced in the mid-90s prior to 9/11. And one of the ways we've had avionics technicians and others from Boeing, et cetera, Raytheon come forward and acknowledge this fact. But what we put on the website was an interview down beneath this, Richard. There's an interview conducted by the late Rob Balsamo, who was the co-founder of Pilots for 9/11 Truth, and he's interviewing Wayne Anderson, who's a seasoned avionics technician. And I really encourage you, if you're interested in this remote system, is to watch this entire 45-minute audio recorded interview, because in it, they go into detail explaining how the system works, but they also acknowledge that it was developed, installed on an airplane, and tested in a hangar. And Richard, I just have a brief excerpt from the interview that I asked you to play. I think it lasts about a minute and a half.
Positive look at what the control is doing.
Right.
So then while I was still down there, he said, "Okay, now let's start disconnect. Now let's start pulling circuit breakers." And as we started pulling circuit breakers, whether it be the transponder or the autopilot or the computer, I can't remember the term for that, the acronym for the computer on the 757 that managed all that. It didn't seem to matter what breakers. We had them all out at one time.
Wow.
You know, still had control of the autopilot. It was still flying it, cut and pick an airplane. There wasn't nothing you could do with it.
Wow. See, now that's very important, folks, because I mean, the circuit breaker is your last chance to disconnect that autopilot. We discussed the disconnect button on the yoke, if you hit the yoke or move the yoke at a certain pounds per square inch, certain pressure of pounds, the autopilot should disconnect. But once you start pulling, and if that all fails, and if you start pulling circuit breakers, it should definitely be the autopilot should disconnect at that point. Now, what Wayne is telling us is that the autopilot remained on and controlled from somebody who was not in the cockpit. And all this technology was available prior to September 11th, 2001. That's pretty wild. As a pilot myself.
Interesting.
Yes, it is. And there's others. I had a Raytheon former employee, come to me on Twitter, and they wouldn't identify themselves as male or female, but said they had a wealth of information to show that this system was designed and employed on aircraft prior to 9/11. And he or she was going to come forth with all this evidence, and got cold feet and basically told me to bug off. She didn't want to have it. The person didn't want to have anything to do with it, because that's what you find, and you probably do with architects, Richard. They'll endorse the idea of demanding a new investigation, but they don't want to go beyond that. It's the same with pilots who are trying to get interviewed. If they're active duty, military, or active employees at an airline, they say, no, I don't want to participate in this. So it's a shame. But anyhow.
But they'll wink at you on the side and say, I agree with you.
They'll say, I agree with you, and keep up the great work.
Yeah.
So there's 3 other videos down here underneath this. This one on Dov Zakheim, I won't even get into him. Take a look at that one. And then James.
We want to talk about Dov Zakheim.
Okay, you want to? Okay.
I heard that he owned a company that made or installed these uninterruptible pilot systems. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, I'll real quick give you background on Dov. He's a dual U.S. Israeli citizen that served in some capacity in government since the Reagan years. He was George Bush Jr.'s foreign policy advisor coming into the 2000 election. He was also CEO of a company called System Planning Corporation that developed a system called it's escaping me right now. Flight termination system. And the flight termination system is designed to remotely control an airborne flight vehicle in the event of a malfunction. Say an example, they're test firing a missile and it misfires, and they want to get the missile away from populated areas. So they can remotely take control of this vehicle and guide it to a safe area where the vehicle could be parachuted down or blown up. And this flight terminal, some people say that Dov Zakheim was the mastermind in 9/11. I did a program on with Scott Bennett on Jason Goodman solely on this man. And he, in April 2001, 4 months before 9/11, Bush appoints him, guess what? Comptroller of the Pentagon, overseeing the Office of Budget Analysts that were investigating the missing $2.3 trillion. So was that a coincidence or not? He went on from government, a government position to Booz Allen Hamilton, if you know anything about that organization. Some believe it's a CIA front company. And he finally got his own consulting company, and I believe he's back in Israel right now. So highly controversial figure. He co-authored the Project for New American Centuries paper, Rebuilding America's Defenses, that 1 year prior to 9/11 called for the need for a new Pearl Harbor for the United States to garner public support for future military adventures. So they got their wish a year later. Their Pearl Harbor with 9/11. So watch that video, and then the one underneath that is James Corbett did an outstanding job on the remote controlled aircraft there. Watch that. And lastly, I don't know how long that one is, Richard, but it's worth watching that one. And then lastly, down there, your friend Christopher Boland is interviewed by Richie Allen in the UK, and he goes into detail. He's very knowledgeable about the uninterruptible autopilot system, and he goes into detail explaining how, if you recall, there was a Russian Metrojet over the Sinai several years ago in the heat of battle in Syria, where they blamed ISIS for blowing up this Metrojet. Well, Christopher goes into detail explaining how that wasn't possible, and got flight data recorder information and showed the wild gyrations this aircraft went through before it was crashed. So watch that one too. Watch every video on the website. It's a simple read. Read it, and we say here at the bottom, we didn't come out and say what actually happened. We said what could not have happened. The hijackers couldn't have flown the airplane. And we offer this uninterruptible autopilot system as the only viable alternative explanation as to how the aircraft could have been flown that day. And then we say, did the experienced hijackers pilot, or was it remotely guided? You be the judge. And we're convinced that with the information we have on the website, you'll agree with our assessment. So that's basically it, Richard. If you got any questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious question is, if there were no hijackers on the planes, what happened to them? Not to mention the people that are said to have been lost, the lives lost on these planes.
Right. That goes back to people saying there were no planes or drones were used to hit the building. There was an airborne swap of aircraft. And I don't know how many viewers are familiar with Rebecca Ross' books that she's written, but she contends that there was an airborne swap of aircraft over Stewart Air Force Base, and the planes with passengers were remotely guided to Westover Air Force Base up in Massachusetts, auto-landed, hauled into a terminal, forced to make phone calls, and then the aircraft, the people were snubbed. That's her, what her books say. You've got other people who believe that these aircraft were remotely guided out over the Atlantic and blown up there, and still others who believe that the aircraft were remotely guided are flown by other people inside the aircraft besides the hijackers to Cleveland and Chicago and landed there, and the passengers were offloaded. We don't even go there, Richard. We don't even speculate on what could have happened. The scope of what we're saying is so narrow that we don't go in. You can go to the Pentagon. Some people say it was a missile. Some people say it was swapped with the 737. You can talk to David Chandler, who I believe you've interviewed. He has compelling evidence that concludes that it was American 77 that hit the Pentagon. Or you can talk about Adam Eisenberg, who you just interviewed, who says that there was no plane there. So I've talked to both of them and I've listened to what they have to say, and it's convincing evidence, but we don't go there with our organization.
Gotcha. I guess it's wise not to speculate. I learned about that at 9/11 Truth. We tried not to speculate, and it's a tough position to take because we get accused of dodging the tough questions.
Right.
But hey, what if I speculate, I'm going to be accused of things a lot worse than that.
Exactly. And believe me, I've got, not only me, our organization has critics out there. Anytime I start to talk about airplanes, they say, probably in the chat room right now, people are saying, hey, dummy, there were no airplanes. What are you talking about, hijackers, et cetera? So I always get it. And if you look at the home page, the first paragraph, we say it was remotely taken control and flown to a target destination. When we say target destination, you can scroll down a little bit there. We intentionally put that right there in the first paragraph. No, the first paragraph. Anyhow, we intentionally put that, there it is right there. Flown to it, guided to its target destination. The target destination could be a building, or it could be one of the scenarios I just described. So we don't even touch it there. We leave it open for people to judge on their own.
Well, how did we do, Dan? Did we get through it?
I think we did.
Let's find out what questions we have from our audience. And there's nobody better equipped to help us than our wonderful assistant, Gail. So let's readmit her from the green room.
Okay. Hope I can answer the questions.
Me too, Dan, because we don't want to be without answers. You got some tough questions for Dan?
I do. Now, I think, hold on. I had to turn off the video. Where am I?
And you won't need to look at yourself.
I do have questions.
You can just look at them.
Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm talking now, but I'm also talking on the screen. So
what are the questions, Gail?
Okay. The first question is from Anthony, and he says, has Captain Dan ever heard of Southern Airways Flight 49 that landed in Cuba?
No, I have not. I wish I could talk to him direct so he could enlighten me, but I had not heard of that. Was that a remote control job? Is that what he's contending, or does he have any ongoing comments there in the chat room?
Or if he can forward a link to that info to the contact us form on our website, I'll forward that to Captain Dan.
Or you can just go to the join us page of our website and give it to us there in the comments section. So
yes, that's even better. Now the 911pilots.org is the website for Captain Dan Hanley and the 9/11 pilot whistleblowers. That's 911pilots.org.
And anybody that reads the website and agrees with it, we'd appreciate it. if you'd pass that on to interested and concerned family members, friends, and neighbors. I'll also add, I'm on Twitter at Dan Hanley 4 and on Facebook at Dan Hanley if you want to join us there.
Perfect. Okay, Gail.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. The next question is from John B. He asked, there was a drama movie about 9/11. In it, all of the planes that allegedly crashed were diverted instead to Cleveland International. The passengers and crew then sent to a NASA facility there. Is this possible?
Yes. I mean, there are some people that believe that there were the Mossad agents on board that were actually capable of flying the airplane and took them to these locations. Other people believe that it could have been remotely guided because the remote system on the aircraft, you got to realize the airplane's capable of being remotely controlled to an auto landing. I mean, you see this on an instrument approach when the weather's inclement and it goes below a certain visibility. Pilots are required to auto land the aircraft, and it puts the airplane right down on the touchdown zone on the center line of the runway, and they have to disconnect the autopilot to clear the runway, take control of the aircraft. So yes, it would be possible for them to be diverted to these airports. And yes, I've heard this and many other theories as well. So I hope that answers his question.
Yes, very good answer. And this is from Gene. He said he has 3 questions. Could a Boeing 767-200 produce enough thrust and maintain enough structural integrity to be flown into WTC 1 and 2? How about a 757 flying along the ground into the Pentagon?
Okay. Well, as Doug Green mentioned in my interview of him, those speeds of 500 knots exceeded the maximum operating speed of a 757 and 767 by 120 to 140 knots at sea level. And there are structural aircraft engineers that say, some say those speeds aren't achievable at that low an altitude. Others say, like I remember watching a video on Pilots for 9/11 Truth that said that parts would have started coming off the airplane and they could have come apart just because
What's
of
the problem at sea level?
air density and the structural limit of the aircraft with that high a speed would just cause aircraft parts to come off the aircraft.
Well, so
well, the government, Richard,
there's more air down at sea level than there is up at 30,000 feet. So that's why they fly faster up there?
Yes, that's correct. And the temperature is much cooler too. So, but Richard, the government and these sources of these airspeeds came from several different organizations, and the government has a lot of explaining to do in that regard. Just because of what these structural engineers are saying, how could they possibly have flown these speeds?
Well, I'm just wondering if that's true, and I don't doubt it. Why wouldn't the official story be adjusted to accommodate a realistic speed at sea level? Why would they magnify the speed?
I don't know. That's a $64 million question. They just need to explain how they put out these figures and how it was possible, which they won't do. So.
Okay. And this question is from Jean. Can Dan definitively say whether the cockpits of the flights on 9/11 were manned or unmanned, regardless of the BUAP system?
Yeah, I think he's asking, were there hijackers on board and did they commandeer the aircraft and try to take control? And this is speculative on my part, but I personally believe, even though there were no video footage of these hijackers getting on the airplane, it showed them coming through security, okay? But I personally believe, and it's just my own opinion, and it doesn't reflect the opinion of our organization, that there were hijackers on board because of a number of reasons. I believe that, and that they may have commandeered the airplane, but I believe that the uninterruptible autopilot took control of the airplane and gave them the biggest surprise of their life when they couldn't control the thing. They were patsies. That's what I believe. Yes, they were on board, but they were patsies.
Interesting.
Mhm.
What
Okay.
I understand there are those who have done analysis of the airports and have determined that these hijackers didn't even make it to the planes. Have you heard that? And what's and the evidence for that?
No, I have not really, Richard. I haven't heard that.
Okay. And I haven't determined this research, but we're going to get to the bottom of it in one of our conferences that are going to be happening on a monthly basis, live stream conferences all day. The first one on the Pentagon, which includes mostly the damage at the Pentagon. But we'll get to the flights also, and we'll have you back for that episode, Dan.
Okay,
and the
okay.
hijackers also, and get some of these experts and research authorities on these subjects, as well as Shanksville, the war drills, the financial crimes of 9/11. Subsequent months will have different themes. And so we're very excited to bring 9/11 Con to the 9/11 Truth Movement.
That sounds great, Richard. That sounds great.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
All right, ready for another question?
Sure.
Mhm.
This is from Anthony. He asks, what does Captain Dan think about the passengers, crew, and alleged phone calls if the planes were remotely controlled, if they were even those planes?
Again, we don't go there, but I'll talk.
Well, you don't go where specifically. He put a lot
Well,
in that question.
yeah. Okay, he did, and I know about the phone call, and I've heard arguments that they were synthesized phone calls. Rebecca Roth claims yes, they were made, but the planes were auto landed at Westover, and the passengers were forced to make the phone call. So
Is that Westover Air Force Base?
yeah, in Massachusetts, yes.
Okay.
But the argument there is the cell phone calls could not have been made at altitude in September 2001. It had to do with the cell phone towers.
At altitude, you mean at 30,000 feet where they were
Right.
allegedly made? Okay.
Right. So that brings a big question as to whether or not the cell phone calls were legitimate or not.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
What's the rest of that question, Gail? I don't know if we got to all of it. I may have interrupted.
So the question was, what does Captain Dan think about the passengers, crew, and alleged phone calls if the planes were remotely controlled, if they even were those planes?
Well, that's a big question. Were they the planes? I mean, that gets into the argument of the aircraft swaps, okay? And I don't have a photo of it, but then you can get into a photo of United. There were 4 independent photos taken of United 175 hitting the South Tower, if you want to believe that scenario. And on all 4 of them, there is a long cylindrical pod on the bottom of the aircraft. One of the photos was taken by CNN and 3 other independent photographs, but they all show this pod, and a Spanish photography crew experts analyzed the photos and confirmed that they couldn't have been photoshopped because the photos were too granular, and that these pods did in fact exist there. But if you go back to Dov Zakheim's flight termination system and look at what it looks like, it is a cylindrical pod. Now, whether or not the airplanes were electronically hijacked, and a swap was made, and those were actually military aircraft with a flight termination system on it, remains to be seen. But that photograph is highly controversial. I wish we could flash it up on the screen, but I don't have it.
Flight termination system. Can you describe what you mean by that?
Well, that's the system I was talking about that Dobbs Ockheim's company produced.
What does it do? What is it?
Well, it's capable of blowing up an airplane in flight. I mean,
Oh,
if you want to believe it, it would be capable if they could time it precisely to blow up as it hits a building, I guess.
oh,
But
I see.
again, I don't know enough about the system to make an authoritative statement in that regard. So I just
Okay,
know
so
that it
this
exists. And go
This is a
ahead.
bomb that is installed on the bottom of an airplane, this flight termination system. I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to stick it inside the airplane?
I don't know why it's on the outside, really, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anybody who has done some research on that, you might let us know, and maybe we'll have you on as a guest, and Dan and I can learn about it too.
Well, Rebecca Roth would be a good one to have on as a guest, Richard. She's
I
written
don't
3
think
books.
so.
You don't want to? You don't want to run? Okay. Well, she wrote the 3 books: Methodical Deception, Methodical Conclusion. I can't remember the
Yeah.
third one, but
Yeah,
the-
and the problem that I have with her is that she has repeatedly, after a conversation that I had with her for an hour, she repeatedly lied about the organization AE 9/11 Truth, about myself, and about others, and she has lost all credibility in my mind because of those. It's as if, I don't know, it's as if she was setting us up to fail. I was really shocked because I liked her. I mean, she's a very likable person, but she says there's nobody in the 9/11 Truth movement that's telling the truth, and I know that's a lie.
well, she was a Facebook friend, but she blocked me when I defended a fellow pilot publicly on one of her posts. And I had not talked to her, but we messaged back and forth several times. And she's the first person that I learned this term, flight termination system, and Dobbs Ockheim's name several years ago. And it's caused me to start doing my own research on it. And there really isn't a lot of information out there on this flight termination system if you go to research it. So that's why I'm not that knowledgeable on the system.
She's one of the few people in the 9/11 Truth movement that I have feeling strong enough about that I could throw terms like we don't like to hear around here. Anyway, yeah, we better go to the next question before I start talking too much again.
This is from Jean. Is there any doubt with Dan that the BUAP, which he explains means Boeing Uninterruptible Autopilot, could fly the flight profiles of flights 11, 175, and 77? How would these aircraft have sustained structurally?
Well, we go back to the speed issue there. But yes, I believe if the aircraft were under control by the uninterruptible autopilot system, they could precisely strike the targets, because most people aren't aware that the advanced navigation system on these sophisticated modern commercial jet aircraft is derived from cruise missile technology and is extremely accurate. And wherever it's programmed, it will go. Imagine one of the pages on that control display unit having information. It's called the legs page. And on the left side of the legs page, there's waypoints or geographical points. And on the right-hand column, there's a speed and an altitude. If that's programmed, and it can be with this uninterruptible autopilot, this information is uplinked into the flight management computer, it flies precisely that target, that course and speed and altitude. So if that was programmed into the computer, that's where the airplane's going.
Okay. Excuse me. This question is from Ray. He says, there was a male voice that said on the radio on the frequency that was used by Flight 93, quote, We have a bomb on board, unquote.
Right.
Does Dan think explosives were on the planes?
Do I? I don't know. As far that's Flight 93 in Shanksville, and there's a lot of speculation. Some people say there wasn't even a plane there. Other people say it was shot down. Other people say it was blown up in the air. So I personally believe the aircraft was blown up in the air because the debris field spreads out over 70 acres. And people don't know who David Cole is, but he's an expert on 9/11 in my mind because he's
I
done
know
so much.
who he is.
Yeah,
Most
he's done
of us
so.
know who he is.
Yeah, he's done so much Freedom of Information Act requests on 9/11. He's very knowledgeable, and he's the one that told me that a forensic pathologist obtained body samples from the debris field of United 93 and conclusively proved through DNA samples that they were from the passengers of that flight. So that leads me to believe, if we're to believe the forensic pathologist and David Cole, that the aircraft was United 93. And because of the wide debris field, I believe that it was blown up in the air, or it could have been shot down. But I do believe the aircraft was there, and I hope that answers Ray's question.
Okay. Yes, I think you did a good job.
And for those of you who know who the experts are on these various subjects, because I've been living in a bubble for 15 years inside of AE 9/11 Truth and focusing only on the towers. Now we're going to have these series of conferences, 9/11 Con, on subjects like Flight 93 and Shanksville. I really need your help out there. So I'm appealing to you to let me know who the best authors and researchers are on this subject, on other subjects. In case of the Pentagon, we were aware of the work of Barbara Honegger, David Chandler, Aldo Rossi, and Craig Ranke of CIT, and Craig McKee, if he's willing to come on and speak at our Pentagon conference. But there may be others that are supporting and the evidence of a missile hitting the Pentagon. So I'm willing to bring that evidence in also, but I don't know who that is. I don't have a way of getting a hold of Thierry Masson, for instance, or anyone who shows evidence. Who are they of a missile hitting the Pentagon? So that's something I'm also appealing to help for. So please, the other aspects of 9/11 as well, the air drills, for instance, the war games. We need experts on all these subjects, and I need to know who the best ones are. So please help me with that, you guys. Sorry, Gail, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Now, just looking through the YouTube questions. This is from either Hegelian. I'm so sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly. I think it's Hegelian Dialectics White Rabbit. Says, we are with Dan.
Hegelian Dialectic White Rabbit.
White
I haven't
Rabbit.
heard in this context.
You just said it better than I did. I don't know how you did that.
White Rabbit.
All right.
That
Follow
sounds
the
like
White
it comes out
Rabbit.
of it sounds like it comes out of Q. But anyway, go ahead.
That sounds okay. So he says, we are with Dan and believe these planes were remotely flown, whether they were switched or not. But our question is, wasn't there supposed to be a debate on remotes? No remotes used. I'm not sure.
I don't know where the debate was to take place. I haven't heard of it, if there is one.
Okay.
And we would certainly love to host the the main speakers of such a debate. I don't think we'd actually have a debate. We would have separate speakers with Q&As separately in a 9/11 con type conference, which are happening on the fourth Saturdays of every month from here to September, when we go into a full 3-day conference.
Okay.
Well, we know the uninterruptible autopilot is real and existed prior to 9/11. The only thing I ask people is, if the hijackers didn't fly it, how were these airplanes controlled? Who flew them? If you got an alternative explanation as to what happened there, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it.
Well, what you're saying is the behavior of the planes cannot be explained by inexperienced or even experienced pilots. That's
Correct.
the thesis that you brought to the table today.
Correct.
And so you're not saying whether they're civilian or outfitted military aircraft, whether they were switched or not. You're just saying they were obviously uninterruptible piloted.
Well, that stand alone blows the holy hell out of an official 9/11 narrative. When you come forward and say there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft, that is a pretty strong statement to make. And we believe that we have the evidence on the site to back our allegations.
Okay.
Okay. So this is from Ray. Does Dan think explosives were on the floor planes on 9/11?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't have an opinion. I mean,
for what it's worth, I don't know either. We had a mighty explosion, of course, when the planes hit the towers. Could that be accountable by the impacts and the jet fuel? Maybe, maybe not. It's kind of irrelevant in a way, because an hour to an hour and a half after the planes hit the towers, what we have is absolutely irrefutable and abundant forensic evidence to show that the controlled demolition and explosive and incendiary controlled demolition of the towers ensued.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more to add?
No.
Okay. And then Ray asks, is jet fuel considered an explosive, or is jet fuel a flammable liquid?
It's a flammable that can explode.
It's jet fuel is essentially kerosene,
right.
From many experts, right? You pour some jet fuel on the pavement, you light it, and it burns very nicely. It doesn't explode under those conditions. Now, it can be explosive when the air fuel mixture is generated correctly, and you create a thermobaric bomb, kind of like what we see in the air happening when the jet fuel is sprayed out and it explodes under those conditions. How does that sound, Dan?
That sounds good.
That's
excellent. Thanks for bailing me out there, Rich.
Okay, Jean asks, can Dan give us an update on Field McConnell?
Wow. Yeah. Field McConnell is a former Northwest Airlines DC-10 captain who they were going to try to medically ground in 2006 before I warned him that it was a setup, and he retired early. He was the first person in February 2007 that introduced me to the uninterruptible autopilot. So Field and I worked hand in hand with another gentleman named David Hawkins for several years before Field spun off into other areas outside of 9/11, one of which was child trafficking and pedophilia related issues concerning Jeffrey Epstein in Broward County, Florida. And he had
He
a
was exposing
podcast.
Jeffrey Epstein.
He was exposing the corruption in Broward County, Florida,
Okay.
which is the seat of those two issues in the United States. So what happened with Field was a judge, there was a woman named Kim Picasso, and I'm getting into too much detail. Anyhow, long story short, he was extradited to Florida, thrown in prison where they tried to kill him. He finally got out and is back in his home in Plum City, Wisconsin. But he did have an ankle bracelet on, and he has been banned from going on any electronic media. So he can't do his podcast again, I don't believe. I just did an interview with him and Ray McGinnis, the guy that contacted you today, Richard. But he's in good, long story short, he's in good health. He's in fighting condition and wants to come back out in some capacity to continue the work he was doing.
Oh,
Okay. Just to make note that Hegelian's Dialectics White Rabbit did comment after our little dialogue there, and they are not associated with Q in any way. Just FYI, since you made the comment, Richard.
what are they associated with?
Well, now you're asking them questions instead of us asking Dan questions. Let's
Okay.
not distract. All right.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah.
Anthony asked, why are aircraft used for such events? Big spectacles. I'm not sure exactly. I think that was a question directed for you, Dan.
I'm not sure I understand. I'm not sure I understand the question, but
Yeah, clarify that, questioner. What do you mean by such events? I mean,
For
aircraft
such
was
big events.
for.
No, I'm sorry. For such events, big spectacles. Yes.
big spectacle.
They make big spectacles.
Yeah.
I mean, you crash an airliner into a big, tall building and you got a big spectacle, and that's the whole point. We're trying to create shock and awe in the American people and manipulate them to going to war by killing thousands of people and destroying American icons and attacking the Pentagon, causing us to declare an act of war, which which allows them to avoid the preservation of evidence, by the way, but enables us to go to war because Osama bin Laden did it, as we're told. And so we have to go in and get those bastards in Afghanistan. And why not Iraq also, since we're on the rampage and creating military hegemony in the Middle East, which was the goal of, as Dan mentioned, of the Project for a New American Century. So maybe that answers the question. I'm not sure.
Good job, Rich.
All right. I think that's all the questions.
Oh my goodness. Dan.
Oh, I'm sorry if I talked your ear off. You two. I get on a roll, and I know that there's a lot of material to cover, but I want to thank you both for having me on the program. I appreciate the questions and the viewers who joined us today as well. So,
oh, my goodness, I appreciate your efforts and answers and your presence with us. It's been incredible. What thoughts do you have to leave us with?
Well, just we're trying to get the website out to as many people in the world. There's 7.8 billion people in the world, and that's a lot of people to try to, and your website's no better than the advertising you're doing. So we're trying to get on podcasts like this, and I'm trying to get on the media in South Asia to tell Muslims there were no Muslim hijackers as a control of the aircraft. But anything anybody can do to help spread the word about 911pilots.org is appreciated. We can look at our 911pilots.org. We can look at our website analytics and see that it's being read in most countries in the world, but the numbers aren't huge enough for us. We want more people to go there. So,
Captain Dan Hanley, thank you from the bottom of our heart. We hearts.
Mhm.
We do appreciate it
Yes.
so much, and we'll have you back again when we get into these subjects. And 9/11 Con coming up. March 19th is the first one on the Pentagon, but after that, we'll get into the pilots and the systems of and how they work. If we can go deeper into that at that time, that would be awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
We'll have
thank you,
back.
Dan.
And there he goes. And gosh, Gail, what do you think? Do you think that we had hijackers flying these planes?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that. I personally would have to do a lot of research that I have not had time to do yet before I even make a call on that. Or
Yeah,
give
but
an
he made a
opinion.
good case, didn't he?
He did, and that's the
That
thing.
they did not.
I would love. I really, really want to dig in deeper and research that more for myself,
Yeah.
so that I can have my own opinion. Yes.
Well, thank you for collecting the questions. And on a new platform here, we have conflicts with Pakistan on using StreamYard, and it was quite difficult, and it proved to be the problem with originally that we had with Dan. So we're on Zoom tonight for the first time, streaming to YouTube, and had some challenges, but we're doing great. Well, my dear, I'll let you go, and we will connect on our next podcast, which is Thursday. Tell us about our guest.
Yes, we get Barbara back, Barbara Honecker, right?
On the subject of
where's my notes? No.
War games, the war
Yes,
games, the
thank you.
drills on 9/11. It's going to be fascinating.
It is. I have short-term memory issues. Sorry, but yes, it is going to be. I love listening to Barbara. She's she's a very good speaker too.
She does her research. Okay, so thank you, and we'll watch how we sign off, you guys, on Zoom. This is going to be good. We let go of Gail, we share our screen again, and we sign off like so.
Thank you for joining us on yet another informative and soul-stirring episode of Richard Gage 9/11 Unleashed. We'll be on the air again next week with another very special guest from the 9/11 Truth Movement and beyond. Visit us at richardgage911.org, where you can find our schedule, learn about the WTC evidence, and of course, sign up for our emails and support us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.